The desperate call, the great assembly hall of Coalition Prime, had never felt so small. Ambassador Lyra Vex stood at the center podium, her silver feathers dulled with exhaustion, and her usually melodic voice cracked with desperation. Around her, representatives from the 12-member species of the Zephyr Coalition sat in stunned silence, their varied forms united only by the fear that permeated the chamber. Kepler's rest is gone, Lyra announced, her avian features trembling. The entire system consumed in 47 hours. That brings our losses to 8 complete star systems, including over 12 billion lives. The numbers hung in the air, like a death sentence. In the span of 3 months, nearly half of the Coalition's territory had been devoured by an enemy they barely understood. General Tormax rose from his seat, his massive stone-like form casting long shadows across the chamber. The Goliathan's body was composed of living rock and crystal, making him nearly indestructible by most standards, yet even he seemed diminished by the scale of their enemy. Our combined fleets engaged the Void Hunters at Kepler's Rest, he reported, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. 43 vessels, our finest ships and crews. They lasted 11 minutes against a single Harvester-class organism. Dr. Naya Flux materialized beside the podium, her ethereal form flickering with distressed energy patterns. As an Etherian, she existed as pure consciousness-given form, capable of processing vast amounts of data simultaneously. Her analysis only made their situation more hopeless. The Void Hunters are unlike anything in our databases, she said, her voice resonating with harmonics that made the air itself vibrate. They consume matter and energy at the molecular level, converting entire planets into biomass for their hive ships. Their technology appears to be purely biological, making our conventional weapons ineffective. The Coalition had been born from peace, not war. For over 2 centuries, the 12 species had worked together, sharing technology and resources, exploring the galaxy with curiosity rather than conquest. Their ships were designed for research and trade, their weapons meant for defense against pirates and natural disasters. They had never encountered anything like the Void Hunters. Elder Zyth of the crystalline hegemony chimed a series of worried notes, the sound echoing from her mineral body like wind through stone formations. The mathematical progression is clear, she translated through her communication device. At their current consumption rate, they will reach Coalition Prime within 60 standard days. Our remaining forces cannot delay them. Ambassador Lyra looked around the chamber at faces that showed every emotion except hope. The tentacled historians writhed their appendages in distress patterns, their vast memories offering no precedent for such devastation. The plasma dancers flickered with chaotic energy, their usual graceful light forms disrupted by panic. Even the ancient tree minds, whose patience was measured in millennia, rustled their leaves with urgent concern. We must consider evacuation, suggested Counselor Vex of the Aquatic Nations, his gills fluttering rapidly. Perhaps we can preserve our populations on distant worlds, wait for the hunters to pass through our region of space. And go where? General Tormax's response was granite hard with bitter reality. The Galactic Trade Federation has already closed their borders. The hegemony of rings refuses to accept refugees. The Stellar Commonwealth won't even respond to our communications. Every major power in this region has decided we're already dead. The truth was crushing in its simplicity. The Zephyr Coalition had always been seen as weaklings by the galaxy's major civilizations. Their commitment to peace, their focus on science and art over military might, had made them objects of condescension rather than respect. Now, when they needed help most desperately, that reputation was a death sentence. Dr. Naya's form pulsed with new data streams. I have been monitoring communication networks throughout the galaxy. The Void Hunter threat is being discussed in 17 different languages, but the consensus is universal. The Coalition is already lost. Most civilizations are preparing defensive measures for when the hunters move beyond our territory. Cowards, rumbled General Tormax. They would rather let us die than risk their own precious ships. Ambassador Lyra straightened her feathers, drawing on reserves of dignity she didn't know she still possessed. Then we will die as we lived, together and with honor. But before we accept defeat, we will send one final message to every known civilization in the galaxy. Someone, somewhere might have the courage to help. The next 12 hours were a frenzy of desperate activity. Communication arrays across Coalition Prime worked at maximum capacity, broadcasting distress signals in over 300 languages and communication protocols. The message was simple and heartbreaking. The Zephyr Coalition was dying, and they were asking for help from anyone who would listen. Responses came slowly, and each one brought fresh disappointment. The merchant guilds offered to purchase cultural artifacts at reduced prices before the Coalition's destruction. The scientific directorate requested permission to study Void Hunter remains after the slaughter. The military orders sent formal condolences for the Coalition's inevitable fate. By the third day, hope had dwindled to almost nothing. Ambassador Lyra sat in her private chambers, staring out at the binary sunset that painted Coalition Prime sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow she would have to address the Coalition one final time, to tell them that the galaxy had abandoned them to die alone. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. Lyra's heart sank, expecting another rejection, another expression of meaningless sympathy. Instead, she found herself looking at something unprecedented, a response from a completely unknown civilization. The message was brief, transmitted in slightly accented but perfectly understandable Galactic standard. Zephyr Coalition Command, this is the Sol System Diplomatic Corps. We have received your distress call and are dispatching immediate assistance. Estimated arrival, 72 hours. Hold position and maintain hope. Help is coming. Lyra stared at the message, her mind struggling to process what she was reading. Sol System? She had never heard of any civilization from that region of space. Her personal database contained no records of any advanced species in that sector. Yet someone had answered their call when the entire galaxy had turned away. She rushed to the communication center, where Dr. Naya was coordinating their final defensive preparations. Doctor, what do you know about the Sol System? The Etherean's form flickered with surprise as she accessed galactic databases. Sol? That's a small yellow star approximately 27,000 light-years from here. Our long-range surveys indicate a single Class M planet with developing life forms. No evidence of spaceflight capability or advanced technology. Why do you ask? Lyra showed her the message, watching as Dr. Naya's energy patterns shifted to confusion, and then to something that might have been hope. This is unexpected. Either someone is playing a cruel joke, or we've missed something significant about this Sol System. Within hours, the news had spread throughout Coalition Prime. A mysterious civilization called humanity had responded to their call for help. Nobody knew who they were or what they were capable of, but after days of rejection and abandonment, even the faintest hope was precious. Ambassador Lyra found herself addressing the Coalition Assembly once again, but this time her voice carried a note of cautious optimism. Citizens of the Coalition, we may not stand alone after all. A species unknown to our databases has promised assistance. We know nothing about their capabilities or intentions, but they have shown more courage than civilizations 1,000 times their size. General Tormax looked skeptical. One unknown species against the Void Hunters? What difference can they possibly make? Perhaps none, Lyra admitted. But they were willing to try when no one else would. That alone is worth something. 3 days later, Coalition sensors detected an incoming vessel at the edge of their system. It was small, sleek, and entirely unfamiliar in design. The ship's hull was a mixture of metallic alloys and ceramic composites, built for efficiency rather than beauty. Most surprisingly, it was completely alone. Single vessel entering the system, reported the sensor operator, his voice tinged with disappointment. Mass approximately 500 tons, minimal weapon signatures, it appears to be a diplomatic courier. General Tormax's hopes crumbled visibly. One ship? One tiny ship against a force that destroyed our entire fleet? The unknown, Vessel requested permission to dock at Coalition Prime's main port. Ambassador Lyra granted the request, her curiosity overriding her disappointment. At least she would finally meet these mysterious humans before the end came. The docking bay was crowded with Coalition officials, scientists, and military personnel, all eager to see the beings who had answered their call. When the ship's airlock opened, a collective gasp went through the crowd. The humans were smaller than most Coalition species, bipedal mammals with pale skin and dark hair. They moved with fluid grace, their eyes alert and intelligent. But what struck the observers most was their demeanor. They showed no fear, no hesitation, despite being vastly outnumbered by alien forms. 3 humans emerged from the ship. The leader was a female with short dark hair and wearing a simple blue uniform adorned with unfamiliar insignia. She approached Ambassador Lyra with confident steps, extending a hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. Ambassador Lyra Vex, I presume. I'm Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Sol System Diplomatic Corps. We received your distress call, and I'm here to discuss terms of assistance. Lyra carefully took the offered hand, surprised by the firmness of the human's grip and the warmth of her skin. Captain Rodriguez, while we appreciate your response, I must be honest. Our situation is beyond desperate. The Void Hunters have destroyed half our territory with minimal losses to themselves. I fear one ship, however brave its crew, cannot make a meaningful difference. Captain Rodriguez smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both sympathy and confidence. Ambassador, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not here to fight the Void Hunters. I'm here to assess the situation and coordinate our response. Coordinate? Dr. Naya materialized nearby, her form flickering with curiosity. Coordinate with whom? The human captain's smile widened. With the fleet, of course. Did you think we'd send just one ship to help allies in distress? The first wave should be arriving within 6 hours, with the main force 24 hours behind them. General Tormax leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows over the small human. Fleet? How many ships are we discussing? Captain Rodriguez consulted a device on her wrist. For the initial deployment, we're looking at approximately 2,800 vessels. Admiral Chen wanted to send more, but Command decided to start with a moderate response to avoid overwhelming your system's infrastructure. The docking bay fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Every Coalition member present stared at the human in disbelief. 2,800 ships? The Coalition's entire remaining fleet numbered less than 60 vessels. Ambassador Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. Captain, are you saying that humanity is sending nearly 3,000 warships to help us? Captain Rodriguez looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Of course. You called for help, didn't you? When humans answer a distress call, we answer it properly. Besides, from our preliminary analysis, the Void Hunters present an interesting tactical challenge. Our military has been looking forward to field testing some new technologies. As if summoned by her words, the communication center burst to life with proximity alarms. On the main display, dozens of new contacts appeared at the system's edge, ships emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. They were larger than the diplomatic vessel, their hulls dark and angular, bristling with weapon systems that looked nothing like Coalition technology. First wave has arrived, Captain Rodriguez announced casually as if discussing the weather. Admiral Chen will want to meet with your leadership to coordinate battle plans. I hope you have a good strategic briefing room. Humans like to be thorough in their planning. Ambassador Lyra stared at the tactical display, where more ships continued to appear with each passing minute. Humanity had sent a fleet larger than anything the Coalition had ever assembled, commanded by beings they'd never heard of, to fight an enemy that had crushed every force sent against it. For the first time in months, she began to believe they might actually survive. Captain Rodriguez, she said, her voice steadying with newfound hope. Would you and your people join us for a full tactical briefing? I believe we have much to discuss. The human smile was sharp and predatory, an expression that would have been terrifying on any other face. On Captain Rodriguez, it looked like the promise of salvation. Ambassador, it would be our pleasure. After all, we humans have a saying, Nobody fights alone. The human response. The coalition's main strategic center had never hosted a briefing of this magnitude. Representatives from all 12 member species crowded around the massive holographic display, while human officers stood with casual confidence that seemed almost alien in its certainty. Ambassador Lyra found herself studying these newcomers, trying to understand the species that had appeared from nowhere to answer their desperate call. Admiral Marcus Chen commanded immediate respect despite his relatively small stature. His graying hair and weathered features spoke of decades of experience, while his dark eyes held an intensity that made even General Tormax seem subdued. Beside him stood Colonel Sarah Blake, a compact human with short blonde hair and scars that marked her as a veteran of conflicts the coalition couldn't imagine. "Let's start with what we know about your enemy," Admiral Chen said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Captain Rodriguez activated a holographic projector that displayed detailed scans of void hunter organisms in 3 dimensions. Dr. Naya materialized closer to the display, her ethereal form flickering with analytical excitement. "These are the most detailed scans we've ever obtained of hunter bioships. How did you acquire this data?" Colonel Blake's smile was cold. "We made contact with their advanced scouts 12 hours ago. 3 hunter organisms attempted to probe our fleet's defenses." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. "They won't be reporting back." General Tormax's rocky features shifted with surprise. "You engaged them and survived?" "Survived?" Captain Rodriguez looked genuinely confused. "Admiral, I think there's been a miscommunication. General, the hunters didn't survive the encounter. We eliminated all 3 organisms within 17 minutes of initial contact." The coalition representatives exchanged stunned glances. 3 void hunter scouts had been enough to devastate entire planetary defense systems. The humans spoke of destroying them as casually as swatting insects. Admiral Chen gestured to the holographic display, which now showed detailed cross-sections of hunter biology. "The organisms are impressive from an evolutionary standpoint. They've optimized for consumption and reproduction, with remarkably efficient energy conversion systems. However, they have several critical weaknesses that your forces weren't equipped to exploit." "Such as?" Ambassador Lyra asked, leaning forward intently. "They're essentially biological machines," explained Captain Rodriguez. "Highly specialized, but lacking adaptability. They've evolved to consume civilizations that fight conventionally. Their defensive systems are calibrated for energy weapons and kinetic projectiles typical of most galactic species." Colonel Blake stepped forward, her expression predatory. "Humans don't fight conventionally. We've spent our entire history finding new ways to kill things that are trying to kill us. These hunters? They're just another problem that needs solving." Dr. Naya's form pulsed with confusion. "But surely you understand the scale of the threat. The hunters consume entire star systems. Their largest organisms are the size of moons, capable of devouring planets in days." Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, we've studied your reports. Impressive biomechanical engineering, but ultimately just a targeting problem. Size works against them in this case. Bigger targets are easier to hit." The casual dismissal of what the coalition considered an extinction-level threat left the chamber in stunned silence. Elder Zythe chimed a series of worried notes which her translator rendered as, "Honored humans, we appreciate your confidence, but perhaps you don't fully comprehend the scope of our enemy's capabilities." Captain Rodriguez exchanged glances with her superior officers. "Admiral, I think they need to see the full deployment to understand our response." Admiral Chen nodded and activated his personal communicator. "Command, this is Chen. Authorization Omega-77. Decloak the fleet for our allies." The chamber's main display shifted to show Coalition Prime's orbital space. For months, the Coalition had grown accustomed to seeing their own meager defensive platforms and the occasional patrol ship. What they saw now defied comprehension. The space around their world was filled with human vessels, not dozens or even hundreds, but thousands of ships stretching beyond the horizon of their sensors, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed the Coalition's. Largest vessels hung in perfect formation alongside sleek destroyers, heavy carriers and support ships of every conceivable design. 2,847 vessels, Admiral Chen announced with the same tone another being might use to discuss lunch plans. We brought enough firepower to sterilize every planet in this sector, then moved on to the next 3 sectors for good measure. General Tormax's voice was barely a whisper. How is this possible? No civilization maintains fleets of this size. The resource requirements alone would bankrupt entire systems. Colonel Blake's grin was sharp enough to cut diamond. General, you're thinking like someone who's never had to fight for survival. Humans have been at war with something or someone for our entire recorded history. Peace for us is just the period between conflicts when we prepare for the next one. But the expense, protested Counselor Vex, his aquatic features trembling. The maintenance costs for such a fleet must consume your entire economy. Our entire economy is built around maintaining this fleet, Captain Rodriguez explained patiently. Every human colony, every industrial world, every mining operation exists partly to support our military capabilities. We learned long ago that in a hostile universe, the only guarantee of peace is the ability to make war too expensive for your enemies. Dr. Naya's form flickered rapidly as she processed this information. Your entire civilization is organized around warfare? That seems inefficient. Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. Doctor, I understand your confusion. The coalition was born from peace, built by species that chose cooperation over conflict. It's admirable, and frankly, it's the kind of civilization we hope to become someday. But first, we have to survive long enough to evolve beyond our nature. The holographic display shifted again, showing tactical projections of the approaching Void Hunter swarm. The enemy force was massive, a living tide of bioships that stretched across multiple star systems. By any conventional measure, it should have been unstoppable. Their main force will arrive in 36 hours, Admiral Chen announced. Based on our analysis, they're bringing approximately 800 capital-class organisms, supported by thousands of smaller hunter-killer variants. 800, General Tormax repeated in horror. We've never faced more than a dozen at once, which is why they keep winning, Colonel Blake said bluntly. They overwhelm individual systems before anyone can mount an effective response. But they've never faced a prepared defense by a species that specializes in killing things. Captain Rodriguez highlighted sections of the tactical display. We've identified 17 critical weaknesses in their swarm tactics. Their bioships rely on pheromone communication systems that can be disrupted. Their energy absorption capabilities have upper limits that can be exceeded through concentrated bombardment. Most importantly, they've never encountered weapons designed specifically to counter biological systems. What kind of weapons? Ambassador Lyra asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Admiral Chen's smile was grim. The kind humans develop when we're really angry about something. Dr. Vasquez, would you brief our allies on the extinction protocol? A new human voice joined the conversation through the communication system. Admiral, this is Dr. Isabella Vasquez, aboard the research vessel Prometheus. The extinction protocol represents our most advanced xenobiology warfare systems. We've developed targeted pathogens, cellular disruptors, and molecular acid compounds designed specifically for the Void Hunter physiology. Dr. Naya's ethereal form went completely still. You created biological weapons in 3 days? Actually, we've been working on theoretical applications for hostile xenobiology for decades, Dr. Vasquez replied cheerfully. Your data just helped us finalize the targeting parameters. We should have the first batch ready for deployment within 6 hours. The coalition representative stared at the humans in a mixture of awe and horror. In less than 4 days, humanity had analyzed an enemy that had baffled coalition scientists for months, developed weapons specifically designed to counter their biology, and deployed a fleet larger than anything in recorded galactic history. There's something else, Admiral Chen continued. We've been monitoring galactic communication since we arrived. Every major civilization is watching this system, waiting to see what happens when the hunters arrive. They expect you to fall, within days, maybe hours. And what do you expect? Ambassador Lyra asked quietly. Colonel Blake's grin was absolutely feral. "We expect to send a message that will echo across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. 18 hours later, that message began to be written. The Void Hunter swarm emerged from hyperspace in a formation that had terrified the galaxy for years. 800 capital organisms, each the size of a large asteroid, accompanied by thousands of smaller bioships that moved like a living storm. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed with anticipation as they detected the rich energy signatures of Coalition Prime. What they found waiting for them defied every instinct evolved over millions of years of easy conquest. The human fleet had arranged itself in a formation that looked almost ceremonial. Ships hung motionless in perfect geometric patterns, their weapons powered but not yet targeting the approaching swarm. For a moment, both forces simply studied each other across the void. Then Admiral Chen's voice echoed across all frequencies, broadcast in every known language including the pheromone chemical combinations used by the hunters themselves. "Void Hunter Swarm, this is Admiral Marcus Chen of the human fleet. You have threatened allies of humanity. You have consumed worlds. Under our protection, by the authority vested in me by the Sol System Defense Council, I hereby sentence your entire species to extinction. You have 30 seconds to begin evacuation before we commence hostilities." The response from the Hunter swarm was immediate and predictable. The massive bioships surged forward in a wave of organic fury, their weapon systems charging with the energy of devoured stars. They had never retreated from prey, never shown mercy to the weak. They would not start now. Admiral Chen's next transmission was directed to his own fleet. "All vessels weapons free, execute extinction protocol, show them why humans earned the nickname Deathworlders." The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries. The hunters, expecting to face another coalition of frightened prey species, instead encountered weapons and tactics that seemed designed by madmen. Human ships moved with impossible coordination, their targeting systems guided by combat algorithms that had been refined through millennia of warfare. Where hunter bioenergy met human kinetic barriers, the barriers held. Where hunter acid spit encountered human reactive armor, the armor adapted faster than the acid could dissolve it. Most devastating of all, when hunter organisms attempted to regenerate from battle damage, Dr. Vasquez's biological weapons ensured that their own healing systems became instruments of self-destruction. The first hunter capital ship died 17 minutes into the battle, its massive form convulsing as targeted pathogens rewrote its genetic structure. The second fell 3 minutes later, torn apart by kinetic impactors that struck with the force of falling asteroids. By the 1-hour mark, the hunter swarm's perfect formation had dissolved into chaos as organisms fled in patterns their species had never known existed. But the humans weren't done. This wasn't just a battle, it was an extermination. Colonel Blake's ground forces had deployed to nearby asteroids, turning chunks of rock into forward fire bases that caught fleeing hunters in crossfires of devastating precision. Fighter squadrons moved through hunter formations like schools of metallic piranha, their weapons specifically calibrated to disrupt bioneural networks. The final phase of the battle lasted only 18 minutes. When it ended, the space around Coalition Prime was filled with the drifting remains of what had once been the galaxy's most feared predator species. 800 capital organisms and thousands of support bioships reduced to expanding clouds of organic debris. Not a single human vessel had been destroyed. Casualty reports listed 7 minor injuries and 1 case of motion sickness. In the stunned silence that followed, Admiral Chen's voice once again filled the communication channels. "Attention all galactic civilizations monitoring this engagement. The Void Hunter species has been eliminated as a threat to interstellar peace. Any surviving organisms that attempt to continue their predatory behavior will be hunted down and destroyed by human forces." He paused, letting the implications sink in across the galaxy. The Zephyr Coalition is now under the protection of humanity. Any act of aggression against Coalition worlds will be considered an act of war against the Sol system. We trust this message is clear. On Coalition Prime, Ambassador, Lyra stared at the tactical display in numb shock. The impossible had happened. The extinction-level threat that had consumed half their territory had been eliminated in less than 3 hours by a species they'd never heard of until 4 days ago. Captain Rodriguez appeared beside her, looking remarkably calm for someone who had just witnessed the annihilation of an entire hostile species. Ambassador, Admiral Chen would like to discuss long-term security arrangements for the Coalition. We're also prepared to begin reconstruction efforts on your damaged worlds immediately. Captain, Lyra said weakly, who are you people? The human's smile was warm, almost gentle, a stark contrast to the devastating efficiency her species had just demonstrated. We're your neighbors, Ambassador. We're the species that lives in the dark corner of the galaxy where everything tries to kill you, so you learn to kill it first. We're the ones who answer when people call for help, because we remember what it was like to face extinction alone. She gestured to the display showing the human fleet, still maintaining perfect formation despite having just fought the galaxy's most feared enemy. We're the ones who bring overwhelming force to every fight, because we learned that when survival is at stake, there's no such thing as overkill. Ambassador Lyra looked out at the stars, where the galaxy's major civilizations were undoubtedly scrambling to reassess everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. The balance of power had shifted in a single afternoon, and a species that had been ignored was now the apex predator of known space. What happens now? She asked. Captain Rodriguez's expression grew serious. Now we learn to be allies. The Coalition gets to rebuild and flourish under human protection, and humanity gets to learn what it means to be part of something larger than warfare. She paused, watching, as rescue ships began moving toward damaged Coalition vessels. Maybe you can teach us how to build a civilization based on peace instead of the capacity for violence. As rescue operations began, and the human fleet started establishing permanent patrol routes through Coalition space, one truth echoed across the galaxy. When civilizations called for help, most species sent thoughts and prayers. Humans sent a war fleet, and they always answered in person.